All right, I'm ready to review some mixes sent in by you guys. So let's dive right in. The first mix is from Andrew Akins. Let's check it out. Okay, so right off the top, my first impression is that this is a kind of a fun piano riff. It's got a fun energy to it, but it's very dry. It almost kind of like, it's like dying on me. The way some of those notes just kind of cut out and die is I don't know, it just catches my attention in the wrong way. So I think part of that is that the dynamics maybe, it sounds like some notes are played a little too softly where others are hit kind of hard. I think that could be evened out and we keep the energy more consistent throughout this intro. So to that end, we can try dialing in some compression here. Just a little bit. Okay, that definitely helps. And then I would also try some delay on this, like just a little bit of a slap delay. So let's try this H delay plugin and let's go lo-fi slap. See, that's what I would do. Something like that. It just gives it a little bit more energy and kind of fills in the gaps a little bit without being too intrusive. Nice tone on the piano though. So let's bypass the delay and compressor now that the entire band kicks in.
The whistle blows, the brakeman call. All aboard, come one and all.
So same kind of impression here once the band and the vocals come in. It's an overall good balance. Tones are pretty good, but it just feels very dry. It doesn't feel like it's all cohesive and glued together. Another thing that's sticking out to me is the vocal doesn't sound very even, and it sounds like you probably left a little bit too much low end in there. So let's check that out.
The whistle blows, the brakeman call. All aboard, come one and all. Ducking out of the rainstorm, I boarded the train. Pale eyes on the platform, you stuck to the rain, and so it goes.
Yeah, so probably filter out a little bit more of the low end below 200. I used a little shelf here, cutting just a little bit. I think that smooths it out and we don't kind of get that woofiness in the vocal as much. But I also think it just needs more compression too. I think that it's a little uneven in the tone of the vocal. Like sometimes we get more of that mid-range popping out, we get more of the high end. So I would just compress this vocal a little more. I just think it's a little too uneven here.
All aboard, come one and all. Ducking out of the rainstorm, I boarded the train. Pale eyes on the platform.
Good tone though. I like the backgrounds. I like the drum sound overall.
And so it goes, the slow adder, the first to book the train, world's up.
So I would keep that slap delay going on the piano this whole time. And then the vocals are kind of naked too.
Whistle blow.
I mean, let's see if we just put this on. Now, just listen to the vocal. Obviously, this delay is on the whole mix, which we wouldn't want. But let's see if we can liven up this vocal a bit.
Whistle blows and train departs. The last that shows the slow at heart. With both your eyes along the arrow.
Listen to the vocal.
Aim, then draw back slow.
So I think a nice lo-fi slap works really well on this vocal too. It helps to glue it in and smooth it out a little bit. And I don't know, it just adds a little bit more energy, makes it sound more finished.
Take your aim, then drop.
Another thing with this vocal too is that it's a little pitchy. I think this could be tuned. Again, you kind of want a looser feel. I get it. You're kind of singing laid back, casual, so you're kind of sliding around notes. We keep that, but the notes that you land on, I think the pitch needs to be a little tighter. And then there was one other arrangement thing I heard here. So coming out of the chorus.
The last shows the slow and hard.
All right, so the chorus ends. We go into a little instrumental here. Then the verse kicks in.
With both your eyes.
So I don't like how that tambourine cuts at the start of the verse here.
With both your eyes.
It sounds like the energy just drops too much all at once. So I would actually cut that tambourine in the instrumental here. So no more tambo here. Kind of brings back the more stripped down vibe. And then when the verse comes in with the vocal, instead of it sounding like everything's dying, it's going to sound like it's lifting again because stuff dropped out, and then now you have the vocal coming back in.
You take your aim, then draw back slow. When up from the mire comes a serpent that hisses.
You could add some more reverb on those background vocals, those oohs and ahs.
The first to set their aim past.
And then the last thing I'll say here is I think the snare could be a little brighter. Again, I like your nice kind of warm drum tones that you've got here, but the snare, it could be a bit brighter. So just listen to that.
The first to set their aim past its mark. Then when the time arrives to shoot the dart, the last...
Yeah, a little more top end, a little more 8K on the snare. Sounds really nice there. Let me just skip through the end.
Slow at heart, the first to rack their brains in the dark. Then when the light
More delay on that sax. Put that in a little bit of separate space. Let it float a little bit.
knows the slow at heart.
Probably brighter on the sax too, but overall good job, Andrew. I think you've done a really good job of your overall tone balance. Just some things with the dynamics of compression that you saw, and then the ambience, working with that to really glue things together and keep the energy moving. By the way, if you want to get better at picking out frequencies like this and knowing what needs to be done, I have a free tool that will help you a lot with that. It's my free mixing cheat sheet. You can get it below at the link in the description, and it's just got my go-to starting points for boosting or cutting with EQ for each track in the mix. So it's at mixcheatcheat.com or in the link below. Okay, let's check out another song. For this one, though, I'm going to send it over to my friend Roelof Klopp. He's an amazing pro mixer and also a mix coach inside of my paid program.
All right, so let's take a look at Michael's mix. No last name in this case, but we'll just hit play and see what happens. All right, so in this intro section, I think you can work on creating a little bit more separation between the bass guitar and the rhythm guitars. I think they're fighting with each other a little bit, and it feels like the bass guitar has a little bit too much mid-range, which makes it sound a little bit honky, a little bit woolly in that mid-range, but the rhythm guitars actually lack some definition in the same frequency area, right? So the mid-range. So let's see if we can enhance the guitars a little bit while sacrificing a little bit of that wooliness of the bass. So I'm just pulling up an EQ here, and I'm trying to do this EQ on just the side, so this affects only everything that's panned out left and right, so it's keeping the center alone. So I'm hoping to target most of the guitars with this EQ move, and let's see if we can bring about some more mid-range definition. So this seems to be a really good frequency area to boost in the guitars, 900 Hz, 1K, something like that. I hope you heard that, but this is just giving a lot more definition of like what notes is he actually playing and stuff like that. And And notice when we bypass this move, the guitars just feel too far to the background. They lose a lot of definition. So definitely try to utilize that 1K area and the guitars a little bit more. Now on the other hand, like I said, the bass guitar maybe has a little bit too much mid-range, which is causing it to fight a little bit with the guitars. So now I'm just doing this EQ in just the center of the mix, hopefully targeting the bass guitar mostly. Notice how this 400, 300 hertz range in the bass guitar is just too loud. And it causes it just to sound a little woolly, right? So what happens if we make a little cut here? So now the whole mix starts to sound scooped, right? Because now we have a scooped bass guitar and a scooped rhythm guitar. So let's bring back that boost that we did on the rhythm guitar. And now we actually have nice separation between these two instruments. So we have mid-rangey guitars, like more mid-range, more definition there, and a less woolly sounding bass. And now they kind of fight with each other a little bit more again, so... Yeah, I hope you can hear that too, but that's a good practice. I would also say the ambient guitars in this section sound really cool, but they're too far to the background in order to really do their job, right? Their job is to give a sense of space and just make this whole thing sound larger than life, right? But in order to do that, they definitely need to be louder. So bring these up for sure. Vocal seems to be pretty good sounding. Alright, this area, or sorry, this section of the song definitely confirms all these things that I mentioned earlier with the guitars versus bass. So let's try to do these same EQ moves really quick. So in the center I had a cut around like this, that woolly kind of kind of sound in the bass. Need a little less of that, but then again, we just need more mid-range in the rhythm guitar. Notice how the guitar seems to get super loud with it, but with this move. But that is really just the fact that it has a much easier job cutting through the mix with that mid-range boost, right? So definitely try that. The other thing I noticed is like an inconsistency in the energy in the top end frequencies, which is most likely due to the cymbals, which sound a little bit uneven in volume. Notice here. So he goes from like a crash to, it could be a hi-hat or a china in the second round of this riff, but the volume of that second cymbal is significantly lower, and the intensity and the impact of it as well. And therefore, like the energy of that top end just is too inconsistent, right? It's like 4 crash hits that is super energetic, then he goes to the other cymbal and it's like way less, right? It's way less exciting to listen to. So definitely try to like equalize that a little bit in terms of like the volume of those cymbals, so that you kind of equalize the energy of that top end a little bit more. So I'll probably just use volume automation in order to fix this issue, because if you go to compression, you probably have to do a lot of gain reduction on those first 4 cymbal hits, which probably causes them to sound very overcompressed in order to bring up those second round of cymbal hits, right? So I would totally just go for volume automation, because in this way it's probably the most transparent way to fix this problem. So try that. Yeah, and then last thing I'll say about this mix is that I think pretty much everything needs to become a little bit brighter, except for the cymbals again, right? I think the cymbals have plenty of energy up there, but vocals, kick, snare, pretty much everything could use a little bit of like a lift in the presence area. So let's see what happens when we do that. It's getting causing the cymbals to be harsh for sure. So let's see if we can do a little bit of both. So I like your kick and snare and vocals a lot better with a little bit of like a lift here. But yeah, again, the cymbals don't need that extra presence, I guess. So definitely go back to the individual tracks instead of doing this on the stereo file, like I'm doing here. But yeah, just try to get a little bit more presence, a little bit more top end in kick, snare, vocals. Could even bring a bit more presence in the rhythm guitars. Again, this is just going to help with creating a lot more energy, and there's plenty of room for that. You don't have to worry about making this mix too bright, because you're definitely a little far off from that. Alright, so this next mix is from Hana's Pouch Shirt. Let's hit play, let's see what happens. Alright, so I like that intro filter, and then it opens up. That's pretty cool. I do think that crash cymbal that comes in here is too harsh. And if you'd have to listen to a full record of this, you'd definitely get some ear fatigue from this crash cymbal. I would totally both lower the volume of that crash here, as well as maybe tame the worst kind of like harsh frequencies. I'm assuming around 10K. Let's see if we can find that. Yeah, so this dip here at around 10K definitely makes it sound a little bit more pleasant, I guess. But even with this cut, I would still lower the volume just a little bit. And I'm saying that because your cymbal's actually the loudest part, the loudest instrument in this mix right now. But I do think that the guitars play a more important role in this section, so I would probably prioritize those. And in this case, not by raising the guitars, but just by lowering the cymbal. That's probably going to give your guitars enough of like the priority that they kind of need. So notice how you just start listening to the guitars more automatically when we have this little dip here. And when we bypass this, the cymbals will just take up too much attention. Notice. And they're distracting from the guitars, right? So yeah, definitely try to lower these cymbals a little bit. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, these guitars are pretty loud, and what I'm assuming is going to happen is when the full band kicks in, it doesn't really impress you anymore, because you're playing kind of all your cards in this section already. I'm going to see if I'm right about that, but just from the way the full band kind of cuts out, and then this guitar kicks in, the guitar felt too loud to me. Like if this is the volume of a full band, then the volume of just one guitar is maybe a bit too much. Let's see if I was right about that transition here. Yeah, absolutely. So when the drums kick in, etc., the volume doesn't increase enough, really, right, to just impress you. So what happens if we just lower this guitar by 1.8 dB, apparently? Now the volume increases a little bit more, and that causes the energy to grow a lot as well as soon as the drums, etc., kick in. What about the transition from this into the guitar? Alright, so I definitely should fix that little cut here. Yeah, this to me makes a little bit more sense in terms of like, if this is what a full band is like volume-wise, then this is what just one guitar should be like. So I noticed in this intro section, and now I'm noticing it here again, is that the rhythm guitars have some sort of like crunch to them. And not like the nice type of crunch that you really want from obviously distorted guitars, but also like it seems to be that after the fact, maybe you've used too much saturation in terms of plug-in saturation in order to get even more crunch in them, but it does sound a little bit over the top maybe. I feel like you're losing a lot of definition from these guitars by having this amount of saturation on them. Yeah, and then I would also say that kind of the relationship between those rhythm guitars and the cymbals could use a little bit of work. And what I mean by that is that, like, in an ideal world, you kind of have your guitars sit from, like, 100 hertz, something like that. That's where they kind of start, and they kind of cut out at like 5 or 6K, something like that. That's where most of the guitars should be sitting. And then ideally, you kind of have your cymbals sitting like above that, right? So you have the guitars cutting out here at 6K, and then the cymbals kind of take over the rest of the top end energy, right? But right now, your guitars, I feel like, are a little bit too dark, and with the cymbals being too bright, like I said before, there's this huge gap now between those guitars and cymbals, which causes the whole mix to feel less glued simply because of the frequency balance being not in an ideal spot just yet. So let's see what happens if we make the guitars a little bit brighter by doing this EQ on the sides of the mix. Already the mix starts to sound a little bit more energetic, by the way, with just a little bit more presence on the guitars. And then also, if we dip out again a little bit of that harshness of the cymbals, now the guitars and cymbals start to sound as if they're really working together a lot more. Let's bypass this. Let's see what happens. Now again, the guitars just feel dark and way disconnected from the cymbals again, right? And the cymbals just take up way too much energy up there. So yeah, these are good things to do. Try to get more presence in the guitars and try to cut out, again, just that top end from the cymbals. I'm trying to look for some vocals, but it could be an instrumental song as well. It's probably an instrumental track. Totally cool. All right, so you have this like chugging guitar part, but also that, I think it could be a synth actually. Yeah, that one, I would totally bring up the volume of that, because it's pretty much the only thing in this whole section that's providing any like real melody, if that makes sense. But right now it's just too low in volume to really bring that melody, right? And so this section feels a little bit more empty than it should feel, if that makes sense. Yeah, so then over here the guitar starts to cut in, which is totally fine. That is pretty much the right volume. But this entire section, that synth can totally take up a little bit more space, make this first section a little bit more interesting, and then kind of grow into the full instrumental section that it probably will become. Alright, so on the other hand, this guitar is too loud in volume. The guitar kicks in right here, I think. That one is taking up too much space from pretty much everything. Like, it's clouding up the drums a little bit, clouding up the rhythm guitars a little bit, and it feels as if it's just poking out of the mix a little bit too much. So I would probably tuck this back in, and what you want to listen for when you rebalance this instrument is that you want it to cut through the mix, obviously, but you don't want it to stick out of the mix. And right now, it's definitely that is definitely the case a little bit. Yeah, and that part just continues right there, right? It's just poking out of the mix a little bit too much. And then again, this section where that doesn't have that lead guitar just feels significantly quieter than this, right? And I think you can kind of equalize that volume a little bit more. So in this case, the quick and easy solution is just to lower that lead guitar so that it's not sticking out of the mix this much. So yeah, man, I think with all these changes, you're going to bring this mix to the next level, because I do like the character of the drums, specifically kick and snare. They sound pretty good, but the cymbals and the guitar relationship tips. That's going to probably be the biggest needle movers in this mix. So hope this helps. Let me know.
That dude's got some amazing ears. He reviews a ton of mixes for our students inside the PPS program every single week. So he's really got this dialed in. We got one more mix that I'm going to review today. And by the way, if you want to get your mix reviewed on this channel, you've got to be subscribed. And you got to make sure you turn on the notifications, because when I'm looking for more mixes to review, I make a post in the community tab, and we usually fill up the inbox like in an hour or so. So you want to make sure you get that notification right away. So make sure that little bell is turned on. All right, let's hear this mix from Laurent. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Let's bring it down a bit. Okay, so this is like swimming in reverb and effects, obviously. I think you've gone a little overboard. I get the vibe that you're trying to create, but it almost sounds like the repeat on the delay and the reverb kicking in is like as loud or louder than the initial strum. Which is too bad, because I actually kind of like the guitar tone, but I don't really like how much ambience and reverb is on it. So back that off. So almost on every element in the mix, like the drums, I actually kind of like the drum vibe. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I can hear when the vocals come in, they're also super wet. Everything's just kind of swimming in effects, and it's creating, or it's causing a lack of clarity in the mix, I think. But let's focus on the drums a bit. So couple things that are bothering me. I like the warm vibe that you've done with the drums. It's pretty close, but it's a little underprocessed for me. So I'd scoop out a little more of this kind of lower mid-range, 300 to 500, really in everything, like cymbals, kick for sure, snare maybe not quite so much, but it still helps here. And the other thing that's bothering me with the drums is timing. It sounds like there's a kick drum missing there. And it's almost as if it's like 90% like really locked in to the tempo. But then every once in a while, some of the hi-hats are a little bit slow. So we want to really dial that in, because it's a bit distracting. And probably the entire mix needs a little bit of a lift. Let's check this out. Okay with the warmer, darker vibe, but it's a little bit lacking here. The guitars too. Let's try to look at those. Those are pretty dark. I think we need those to be a little more up front. Yeah, they're pretty filtered out. And again, they're kind of dark and dull because of all of the reverb and effects on them. But I try to add a little bit more mid-range, around 1K on those guitars. Yeah, cymbals are a little bit washy too. I'd like them to be a little more controlled. And the vocal is just, it's just buried.
When you're crying in your bed, you know you're eating.
So I think that vocal just needs to be turned up and probably compressed a little more, and just back off the effects a little bit, and maybe even low pass filter your effects returns on your vocals just to keep kind of the presence there up front while also creating a little bit of that space and vibe. And let's see, maybe this could benefit from a little more compression overall.
It's your feeling inside.
So I think that does help. And the reason that helps is because we have such like constant noise because of all of the effects on the guitars, and just it's just so like like the whole time. And so it's not kind of moving together with the drums. It's just static, right? And so by putting a compressor on the mix bus, doing a little bit more reduction, when the drums hit, it's going to suck down everything a little bit, which is introducing some dynamic and some movement and feel into those really static guitars. So I think that's why this helps. So a little more mix bus compression.
It's your feeling inside. It's your feeling inside.
Yeah, the main thing here is too much effects. It's almost the opposite of the very first mix, which needed more effects, right? It's just swimming. You've kind of clouded up everything, so just back off that a little bit. Be a little more careful on the tones you're creating. I do think the overall tones of the drums, guitars, and even bass are pretty good. The bass probably needs a little bit more saturation and compression. And like I said, vocal needs to come up. But with those notes and changes, I think your mix would be in a much better spot there, Laurent. All right, that's it for this one. If you want to see me dig in more in depth into someone's actual mix session and completely rearrange and fix things, check out this video right here.